for you that to let you know that it is being recorded and that you're and want to know if you're okay with that. All right, I'm going to mute myself. If you have questions and you want to put them in the chat box at the bottom, you can hit chat if you want to do it that way, or if you want to wait and ask Lions Steve when he has a minute, you can do it that way. Otherwise, you can put them in the chat, and I'll be keeping an eye on that.
Okay, well, thank you. Welcome, everybody. My name's Lions Steve Kaplan from the Troy Club, and this session is on board members, what the difference is between board members and regular club members and what their responsibilities are. Loretta has you all muted so that we don't get a lot of background noise on here. And I'm going to ask that we hold all the questions till the end. I'll leave some time to make sure you get a chance to ask questions, but you're welcome to click on the little box in the bottom of your screen there that says chat and send the message to her. Or you can just wait till the end when I open it up for questions and she unmutes everybody. If you haven't done so, there is a handout that goes with this lecture. It's available on the district website. If you don't have it now, it might be nice to get it afterwards because it's a nice summary and outline of everything that I'm going to talk about. If you have it in front of you, then you can just kind of follow along as I go here. In addition to this lecture, there's a number of good lectures on lionsclubs.org on their main website. If you log in as a member, then there's 5 big choices at the top of the screen, and one of them is Learn. If you click on the Learn, you'll go to the Lions Learning Center, and they have 24 different free courses that you can take. They average from a half hour to an hour based on the topic, and you can pick and choose which ones you're interested in. And it's like if you're going to be a club president, there's a couple of them designed for presidents, there's a couple for secretaries and so on. So that's a good resource to check out too. But we're going to get started here with board members of your club. They have the responsibility of steering the club, the organization, towards a sustainable future. They need to be adopting sound and ethical and legal governance and financial policies that make sure that your club gets there. There's an expression that's around that says, the board governs and the club manages. And what that means is the board of directors is supposed to be looking at the big picture. They're supposed to be governing the overall direction that the club takes. And the club is the management of the club. They're supposed to be doing the day-to-day committee work and fundraising work and so on that the board has approved for them. So again, the board is looking for the big picture, the long-range picture of sustainability of the organization, where the management, the club level, is looking on service, community service delivery, and your operations of the organization. There's one peculiar thing about Lions Club's board of directors, and that is, if you think about a normal board of directors in the retail sector, say, in the private business world, the board of directors sits on top of the pyramid. And there's a very small group that sits in the board of directors, and they might manage over thousands of employees down at the base of the pyramid. And the people at the base, the employees of a corporation, don't have a whole lot of say as to what the board does. The board can set policy, the board can determine what products are being made, they can determine what wage they're going to pay those employees. And really the only recourse that the employees have is to vote a different member onto the board, but they don't really have a say when it comes time to how the board votes. Here in the nonprofit world, though, in Lions Club, that pyramid is upside down. There's a few people on the board in the point of the pyramid, but they're on the bottom, and all the club members are across the top of the pyramid. So in our Constitution and bylaws, the board of directors, and I'm going to read a quote from our bylaws, says, "The board of directors shall constitute the executive board of this club and be responsible for the execution through the club officers of the policies approved by the club. All new business and policy of this club should be first considered and shaped by the board of directors for presentation and approval by the club members at a regular club meeting." So in other words, the key phrase in there is "and approval by the club." So the club can actually override and overrule what the board's decisions are. The board is looking long-term down the road for the big picture, and they decide that part of your mission is vision care. So they want to start a new project of screening, preschool vision screening in your club. The club members can actually vote and say, no, we don't want to do that. The club members have more power than the board does. The board is only supposed to be there setting the policy, looking for that long-range goal, and then presenting that to the club. And the club actually has the final word, unlike in the private sector. All because of that one phrase that they put in our constitutional powers of the board of directors. So the board is supposed to get all new business that comes forward. If somebody has an idea in your club to start a new project, for instance, you want to have that person present it to the board of directors first. The board of directors can debate it and shape it a little bit and make sure that it fits in with their goals, their plans, the long-term vision of the club, and then they can turn it back in, make it a committee, say, and turn it back to the club members for them to vote to do the project and to how they're going to do it. All the nuts and bolts of running that new project is up to the club members. The board shouldn't be trying to micromanage the club. It shouldn't be trying to approve every little decision. They're supposed to approve all financial decisions. They're supposed to approve a budget. But once that budget is done, they can authorize certain individuals in the club to act for them. For instance, say the board says we buy eyeglasses for people, eyeglasses and eye exams, and we have a budget of $2,000 that we're going to spend on that project this year. They can authorize, if they wish, the board can authorize a site chairman in your club or a site committee to have that $2,000 and determine how they're going to spend it. They're going to spend it $200 on this individual, $150 on this individual to get glasses. That site committee chair can dole that money out if the board wants it. In other words, the site committee doesn't have to go to the board every single time it has a expense and say, can I get this expense paid? Can we buy these eyeglasses for someone? If the board chooses, they can set aside a certain amount of money and give it to those individuals and authorize them to make those decisions for them. So there's a delegation of powers from the board to the club members to handle more of those nuts and bolts kind of things that the club has to do. If you're following along on the handout, there's a part on here of strategic planning on the front page that I'm going to come back to. I'm going to flip over to the back side where it talks about the board's legal responsibilities, what the board of directors has to do legally to fulfill their obligations. This information mostly comes from the Attorney General in the state of Ohio. They've put out a really nice pamphlet that explains what a board of directors of a nonprofit, what they have to be doing to fulfill their obligations. And basically there's 4 different duties that a board member has to fulfill. The first one is a duty of care, it's called. That just simply means that you have to understand what your organization's mission is, what the Constitution and bylaws basically says. You have to attend meetings, you have to read the minutes, you have to kind of go over the financial reports. You don't have to be a financial expert, you don't have to be an accountant, but you do have to give it the best shot you can, to the best of your abilities to figure out, are we doing okay? Where's the money going? And that kind of thing. So the duty of care is kind of like saying it's not an honorary position to be on the board of directors. You need to uh, give it a good shot as far as the care that you're providing for the organization. You have to ask questions. You have to make some very informed decisions. And you have to use your independent judgment. You just can't go along because the president suggests something. If you feel it's wrong, you should be speaking up and saying it's wrong, and using your independent judgment there for the benefit of the club. So you have that duty of care, meaning again, it's not an honorary position. You have to do to the best of your ability to understand what the club's about, what your laws and policies are, what your constitution and bylaws says, at least in a very general term. You don't have to be an expert in it, but you do have to do the best you can in it. The second duty is a duty of loyalty. And that's simply saying that you're going to put the interests of the organization before your own interests. You're going to avoid transactions where there's potential conflicts of interest. And if there is a conflict of interest, say, for instance, you own a flower shop and your club has decided they're going to sell roses for a fundraiser. Maybe you should not be involved in the decision there of doing that and where they're going to buy the flowers from. As long as they know that you're a florist, you've disclosed that, you can still participate with the club's activities. But say you're the chairman of the Rose Project and you say, we're going to buy them from my flower shop without taking bids from any other flower shops, that would be considered a conflict. You're making that decision and you're going to personally benefit from it. So you want to avoid that kind of situation. It's okay if the club buys the flowers from you. Say you give them a better discount and you got the lowest bid of anybody in town to provide the flowers that they're going to sell, then it's fine for you to be involved and still make a little money with it. But again, you've disclosed that agreement, you've given them a good deal, you've abstained from the voting on it, you excused yourself from the room when they were going to vote and discuss where they were going to buy the roses from and if they were going to proceed with that project. So, you can avoid all conflicts if you just disclose any possibilities that you have and you keep the interests of that organization, of the club, first. The third duty is a duty to manage the accounts. That means you have to keep some financial records, develop an annual budget that provides some clear direction for spending. You want to make sure all the accounts are audited. You need to do the common sense things that you would if it was your own personal money. So again, you don't have to be a financial expert. You don't have to be an accountant or a lawyer, but you do need to ask for a written financial report, at least quarterly, from your club. You do need to go over that and make sure you understand what's going on in your club, where they're spending the money, what kind of goals and policies do you have for the fundraising, things like that. You need to give it your best shot again. The last of the four duties, we've had duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty to manage the accounts. The last one is the one where most clubs would get themselves in trouble. That's the duty of compliance. And there's two different versions of this. One is that you have to be following the provisions of your organization's governing documents. So if you've got a constitution and bylaws, you've probably got an articles of incorporation that you follow, and you've made some policy decisions that you voted on throughout the years, you need to kind of know what those are and make sure that you're following those. One of the worst mistakes a club or any organization can do is to have a rule in place and then not follow it, because that's showing a real lack of care on your part. So again, you have to invest enough time to know what those rules are, and follow them. So you need to do a little research into what your articles of incorporation said you were doing as an organization. How many of you have a list of the club rules that you've passed at club meetings over the last few years available, so that you remember, oh yeah, we put in a limit for how much we're going to spend on one pair of eyeglasses for an individual. We put a limit of $150 out there. You have to remember those kind of things that have been carried by your club. So, get them in writing, keep a copy of the minutes, and highlight the items that are going to carry from year to year like that. The second part of the duty of compliance, though, and this is the one where a lot of clubs get themselves in trouble, is you have to comply with all the federal and state reporting requirements. There's actually 4 of them that you have to do. The first is the IRS. The IRS, our clubs in our district do a fairly good job. We have only one club that's had their exemption revoked and haven't restated it. 3 years ago, we had 8 clubs. So we've made good progress in that, with 7 of them getting reinstated. We still have one club, the Columbus Inner City Club, that's still exempt from the IRS. Out of all the clubs, though, we have 61 different organizations, clubs and club level foundations that we monitor, and 95% of them have filed their IRS return for this year. We still need 3 clubs to file their IRS return. They've still got a couple of days here to get that done with the extension, but should have been done by now normally. The second state agency is the Ohio Attorney General's Office. We, as a district, do very well there. We were the first district in the state to get 100% compliant, where every club was registered with the Attorney General. And right now we're sitting at 95% have filed their returns for the past year. Again, there's 3 clubs that the deadline is approaching, and the only reason they're not overdue now is because of the COVID-19 extension that the state put in for them. So we need to make sure that everybody's getting compliant with those 2 articles every year. And there's ways that an individual can search for that. There's databases online, irs.gov and ohio.gov. Both have searchable databases where you can type in your name or your EIN number of your club and find out whether your club has filed that or not. The other way is I happen to be the compliance chair for our district, and you can just send me an email and ask me what's the status of our club, and I can easily tell you, where you stand. We run a list just about once a month to see what the status of everybody is, at least once a month during the filing periods. The third place we would like all clubs to be is incorporated, and that's done through the Secretary of State. We currently only have 2 clubs that are not incorporated. The rest of you are incorporated. It's 97%, and that's a great thing. That adds a lot of protection to your club. That incorporation gets renewed every 5 years. So whoever you have sent in as your statutory agent, that person will get a renewal letter in the mail once every 5 years, and you have to send that back in a timely fashion, or your incorporation status will go defunct. There's a number of clubs that are going to come due with their renewal here in the late part of this year, 2020. So we send out, from the compliance committee, we send out renewals on or notices on those to remind the club secretary and the club president that that letter is coming, and make sure that they get that taken care of. The renewals are real easy. It's just a $25 fee, and it pays for 5 years, and you're good for the next 5 years. So you want to make sure that your club is keeping up on that, because that adds that layer of protection against lawsuits against the individual club members, so their liability is reduced. The last one on the duty of compliance, the federal and state reporting, is state sales tax. This one is a bit of a touchy subject for a lot of clubs because we have very little compliance with the state sales tax. Anytime your club buys something for its own use, you should be paying sales tax on it, unless you're going to turn around and resell it. Then the final consumer, the public, would pay the sales tax. But if you're selling any kind of a tangible taxable product, if you're selling roses, brooms, light bulbs, any kind of a tangible product, you're supposed to be collecting sales tax on that from the general public when they purchase that. Now you can include it in the sales price, so you can back it in there so that you don't have to charge odd number of cents. You can include it in your $10 that you're selling them for the broom, and therefore you're only really selling the broom for whatever it would be in your county, the sales tax rate, 7% less than the $10. But so it's cutting into your profit a little bit, or you can just tack it on at the end to make the odd amount of change. But the clubs are supposed to be collecting the sales tax from the public for all those tangible taxable items that they sell and submitting it. There is currently no searchable database available to us to be able to tell what the compliance is across our district. It's estimated that it's less than 40%. It's somewhere 35% or so of the clubs are actually doing this. I'm telling you that several years ago, the IRS and the Attorney General's office started talking to each other, and whoever had the ranking from the IRS, the Attorney General was notified, and that's where 2 years ago the Attorney General started making a big deal and fining clubs for not being registered with them. Well, right now, the Attorney General's office and the sales tax office are talking to each other. So in the next year or two, I really see that the sales tax is going to be the big thing that is going to be a focus of all the clubs. And they're losing money. This is income to the state, and they're always looking for more ways of increasing their revenue. So I think this is going to be a big deal with the state, and they're going to demand compliance with this in the near future. And they might actually fine clubs that have been non-compliant in the past. So my advice is, if your club is selling taxable items, get with your board of directors and make sure that this problem gets taken care of. You get a vendor's license either online or at your county auditor's office, and then you collect and pay the sales tax usually twice a year. They'll set up a little payment schedule based on most Lions clubs that we don't do a lot of business. We're not having thousands and thousands of dollars of sales every week. They'll set you up for twice a year to submit the payment of those sales tax. But that's one area that I think a lot of clubs need to address, is that sales tax compliance there. So that's it for the legal requirements for the board. Those 4 things: duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of manage the accounts, and the duty of compliance, including IRS, Attorney General, incorporation, and sales tax. So what makes a strong board? What would make a board better than average? A lot of us have a board of directors where it's, the president, secretary, treasurer, all your officers, and then they elect a couple of just board members, just director members. And the Constitution and bylaws, the standard form says you should do half and half. You should have, like, if you're doing 4 directors, 2 should be elected in even years and 2 should be elected in odd years for 2-year terms. And that means there's a continuity of that service, that you're not turning the board over every year. So one of the ways to have a strong board is to have some continuity, have some people that have been in the club for a while, that have had lots of experience and have been board members in the past. But at the same time, you don't want to have only those kind of people on your board. You would like to have a lot of diversity on your board. Mix it up with some newer members, some men and some women, some business professionals in different professions and occupations. Try to mix it up with the short and the long term, and have a nice variety of people on the board that can give a lot of different opinions and recommendations. A good board gets some training, and I don't know if I've ever heard of a club that trains their board of directors, but that would be an opportunity maybe for a good club president to talk about what your policies are, what kind of motions have you carried over the last few years that those board members should be aware of. So think about doing some training and some developing of those board members, especially the newer ones that are coming on board. A good strong board sometimes too sets a schedule to review operations. Maybe in the first 6 months of the year, you're going to look at all your fundraising projects and make sure that there's some adequate safeguards there against lawsuits, and that they're all really fulfilling the purposes of your club. Maybe you want to, in the next 6 months, look at your service projects. Are you fulfilling the projects that fulfill your mission? Back under duty of care, we talked about, do you know what your mission is? Do you understand what the organization's about? So you review those operations and see if they're compliant with the mission, the overall mission that you have on there. And the last thing is of a strength of a board is to develop a strategic plan. And this is where I'm jumping back to the first page of the handout if you're looking at it. Strategic planning is a very difficult thing to do, but it is up to the board of directors to have that task to do. It's a process of defining the organization's directions and the decisions of allocating its resources to get there. It involves not just solving problems, but asking those tough questions. So the elements of strategic planning is, do you have a vision? Do you have a mission? What's your core values that you're putting out there? If you can write those down, and that'd be an interesting exercise for a lot of clubs to do, would be, or for the board of directors at least to do, is ask them to write down and bring to the next meeting, what do you think the vision should be for our club? What's our mission? What do you think our core values are here? And see the kinds of answers that you get, and see if you can come to a consensus as to what the board's direction therefore is. Then there's SWOT analysis, SWOT, and that refers to strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So you look at it in those 4 terms. What's your club's strengths? What's your club's weaknesses? Can you build further on those strengths? Can you fix some of the weaknesses in your club? What opportunities do you have? Is there a new service that's needed in your club? Is there a new opportunity for more fundraising in your club? What kind of opportunities are out there? And maybe most important, what threats are out there against your club? Your long-term goals should be to be eliminating as many threats as you can. And we'll come back to that shortly here. Going down the list though, you'd have some long-term goals then. After you've seen what your values are and your mission is, you've evaluated your situation, your goals, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You've examined all those. So now you're going to set some long-term goals. How are you going to get there a few years down the road? And you want to have some yearly goals. You want to have some that you can try to accomplish within a year's time. So you've got long-term goals and then like yearly goals and an action plan developed to get there. If you've never taken the course from Lions International on action plans, it's a really interesting course where you set a goal and then you have to create steps on how you're going to get there. And you ask somebody to be in charge of those steps and you give them a timeline to get that step done. And then you have an evaluation. How are we going to know when that step is done? And there's a process that goes through so that you just don't set a goal. You just don't set a goal saying, we're going to increase membership 5 people, and then you don't do anything about it. You have a plan in place where you're going to make that increase. When we were talking about threats, I would think one threat that is to a lot of our clubs is a lack of growth in membership and a lack of growth in activities of the club, where the same old people are taking care of the same old projects. You haven't done a lot of new things lately. A lot of clubs are really good at writing checks, but not very good at doing hands-on service. Hands-on service, as we know, is what attracts a lot of younger members to the club. If your club is continually to slide downhill in membership, that could be a threat. Is your club going to be around 5 years from now? Is your club still going to be in operation 10 years from now? If it's in doubt, part of your strategic planning should be, how are we going to increase our membership? How are we going to get members more engaged in what they do? How are we going to get more activities done or more service done in our community, more publicity done? There's all kinds of avenues that a club can pursue in their strategic plan to get there. Now, I got a few minutes here. I'd like to open it up and see if anybody's got questions. Loretta, is there any questions being sent in to you?
Okay, this is Gary Clark from Sunbury. We sell Christmas trees every year. Are those taxable in Ohio?
Yes, they are. So you should be paying the sales tax on them.
Well, we pay the sales tax when we purchase them, but should we charge our customers sales tax?
You shouldn't be paying them. You're not the final consumer, so you should not be paying the sales tax when you purchase them. You should be purchasing them with the certificate that says we're going to resell these to the general public, and it's the general public, it's the final consumer that pays the sales tax. So by paying it ahead of time, you're kind of cheating yourselves. You need to ask your tree vendor, hey, we're not the final consumer. We're going to turn around and resell these, so we're exempt from sales tax to you because we're going to pay it, or we're going to collect it from the final consumer. Only the final consumer has to pay sales tax. So every group that touches the tree along the way marks it up a little bit more. The last price that is paid is typically the highest price, and that's the one that the sales tax is based on.
Okay.
Should this be a nonprofit situation that Gary's talking about to the, say, like to the grower?
The grower, if they're selling to the general public, they would charge sales tax then. But if they're selling it to a nonprofit group to resell, then they aren't supposed to be paying or charging the sales tax on those sales. It's only the ones going to the final consumer.
So should Gary be asking that question as well?
Okay.
Steve, would we use our vendor number or our federal ID number? Usually they'll ask for that if you want an exemption on tax or you're buying and not paying tax on it.
You can use your EIN number.
Okay.
You can also use a vendor number. If you're already set up and you're collecting the sales tax now, you've got a vendor number, and you can use that. But a lot of the places want your EIN number, employer identification number, because that tells them that you're a nonprofit group.
Okay.
The only difference would be if any of you are set up your own charitable foundation. There's 7 clubs in our district that have a charitable foundation, a charitable arm set up as a 501c3. If you're a C3, you don't have to pay the sales tax in most cases. You don't have to collect it from the public. You're considered a public charity, and a charity has like a 7-day rule. If you're selling something for less than 7 days out of the year, then you don't have to collect the sales tax on it. Unfortunately, a normal Lions Club, 501c4, doesn't get that exemption. It's only for charitable organizations that get that exemption. So a regular Lions Club has to pay sales tax. A charitable Lions Club does not. And there is a way for every Lions Club out there to start their own charitable foundation. It is not an easy process. Lions International does not recommend it for every club. They think 80% of Lions clubs need to stay C4 so that you wouldn't get that charitable status. But there is 20% out there that they think would benefit. And if you're doing like a lot of gaming activity, if you're doing a lot of bingo nights or card nights, that kind of thing to raise money, you really need to be a C3 then to legally do that. On our district website, there's a document called Legal Considerations, and it's under resources on the district website. If you go there, there's a big page in there on sales tax. There's a big page in there on gambling, gaming activities, raffles, things like that, what your legal responsibilities are. For instance, a raffle, even a 50-50 raffle, is you have to donate at least half of the winnings to a charitable organization. For most of us, that's not an issue. If we have a raffle and we make, $300 profit, you have to pay $150 somewhere in that year to a charitable organization. And most of us make a donation to Pilot Dogs or Ohio Foundation or something, so that's not an issue. But there are laws and rules out there like that. And most of them are explained in that legal considerations document that's on the website. And if you have a hard time finding it, send me an email and I'll send you a copy of it. My email address, if you think of any questions later too, you're welcome to email me and ask. My email is skpk1984@aol.com. That's really clever. That's my initials and my wife's initials, Steve Kaplan, Patty Kaplan, and we were married in 1984. So skpk1984@aol.com. I can answer any questions for you on president's things, financial things, treasurer things, and legal things. It's my field of expertise in Lions.
What about silent auctions?
Silent auctions, let me think. That's considered not a raffle. That's considered a sale. So it would fall under the sales tax rules. Unless it's a like a Chinese auction where you put your raffle tickets in and then they draw one out. If you're not guaranteed to win the prize, then it's a raffle. But if you are bidding and you know you're going to win that item, then it's a sale. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Hey, Steve,
Yeah.
looking to find kind of like a one-page. We have some new club officers, or will be, to give them a one-page overview of their responsibilities. And that's pretty easy to find in LCI website.
It's available on LCI's website under resources. And then I'm trying to think what they officially call them, but there's like a president's electronic book, a secretary's electronic book, and it's just like a book that you can download and print it out yourself. They're usually about 6 or 8 pages long, but you could condense it down fairly easy. Yeah, they waste a lot of space on those, I think. But that kind of material is available from Lions International, yeah.
In a tab called resources.
Under the tab of resources, yes.
Okay.
And if you can't find it, send me an email and I'll try to direct you better there if I sit in front of my computer.
I've got a question going back to your example for a 50-50 raffle.
Yeah.
You have them dispersing 50% of the total raffle cost. So you said if they made 300, if you had 300, you disperse 150. But if they took in 300, wouldn't half of that have automatically gone to the, never mind, I see what I'm doing. I was thinking of an individual selling it, so
yeah,
that
it's not
person
the
got
selling,
50.
it's not the gross income, it's the net profit that you make from the raffle.
Right,
The net profit, 50% has to go to a charity.
right. Even if you're exempt?
We're all exempt as C4.
Well, we're a C3 for part of our stuff.
C3 can get around it. C3 doesn't have to make the 50% donation.
Okay, we usually end up doing it, but I just wanted to make sure we were all right.
Almost all our clubs, that's not a big issue with it. I mean, the one
Yeah.
that gets in trouble sometimes is the district. When they do all the raffles at a district convention, they have to show 50% of the income of that, or the profit of that, going to like a LCIF for the speaker's gift or something. They have to show it at the district level. And since they don't make a lot of donations, sometimes that's difficult.
Okay.
Do any of you belong to Columbus Inner City, Columbus Southern Pines, Franklinton, Northwestern, Urbana, or Woodstock? Nobody? Well, then your clubs are all the ones that were compliant. I can tell you that right now, with the IRS, with the Attorney General, and with the incorporation. If I didn't just name you off there in those 6 clubs, your club is compliant right now, and you've done a good job in recent years of keeping compliant. Those 6 clubs are my problem children that I have to address all the time. And Franklinton's just getting started. They shouldn't be included in a problem list because they're a brand new club, and we just got to get a couple more things filed for them. We got about 6 more minutes. Anybody got any other questions? So the point of the whole lecture here was the board governs and the club manages. The board looks at the big picture. You let the club members micromanage all the details out. You've got that inverted pyramid where the club members actually can outvote the decisions of the board, which is unusual in other settings. We've got legal responsibilities. If you sit on the board, it's not an honorary position. You have to understand what your club's about and what its rules are and its mission and bylaws. You have to make sure you're not putting yourself into a conflict of interest. You have that duty of loyalty where you're putting the organization first. Have to manage the accounts, which means You should be asking for a written financial report. You should be asking for an audit every year. You should be making sure that there's accounting that clearly tells you, a non-expert, where the money is and where it's going for and so on. And then you have that duty of compliance to know what your bylaws say, what your club policies say, and that you're making those 4 different filing requirements.
So, Steve, you said that there's no minimum or maximum of directors?
There isn't. In fact, some clubs have, just their officers. Some clubs have officers plus 4 directors, for an example. But a big club can have a lot of directors, and there's nothing that says your directors all have to be Lions. You can ask, if you're having trouble with finances, you can ask a local accountant, hey, would you come and sit on our board for a year and help us get straightened out? And they don't have to join your club. They can be on the board and they're not a voting member of the board. They're not going to be able to vote policy, but they can help be there to guide you and to be an expert in a particular field to guide you through a situation. So, you can call them a guest of the board or an ex officio member of the board, or however you want to word it, but you can have other people come and sit and be there and give advice, some expert in some field. You can also, have regular club members attend your board meeting, and they can listen, they can talk, they can enter into the debate of a board meeting. They just can't vote on things at the end. Only the voting members are allowed to make that decision. But I think a lot of us fall into the habit of a board meeting, once a month, and a club meeting once a month, and we do kind of the same things at both meetings. Take the time at some point for the board to be looking long-term, to be looking more at the big picture. And again, that would come into that training. Maybe some of our clubs need a little training of their board members so that they understand when we're sitting here as a board of directors, we're not supposed to be micromanaging the pancake breakfast that's coming up next week. We're supposed to be looking at the broad picture and making sure income from that is acceptable. We're taking care of the health department regulations. We're using the money properly when we make profit on it. They're supposed to be looking more at the big picture. So don't try to do the same things at both club meeting and board meetings. Try to have that separation of long-term and short-term micromanaging at the club meetings.
Okay.
We got about 1 more minute. Anybody got a last question? Well, again, send me any questions you think of later as you've talked with this over with your other club members. Send me questions and I'll try to get you an answer in a timely fashion. I appreciate everybody taking time out to be here and to listen to the lecture, and hope you learned something out of it and get a little peace of mind that you're all on the compliance side there of those first 3 anyway. So.
Hey, Steve, I'll ask a question.
Okay.
Why haven't I received any ticket orders from you for our reverse raffle coming up in September? We've still got over 100 tickets left.
You can make that sales pitch to everybody that's online here with you.
There you go.
Wouldn't be a bad idea is to share everyone's email somehow. And Gary, we're from the Worthington Noon and willing to help your club cause, and we'll just have reciprocity here. If everyone has a project, I think it's kind of good to share in everyone's success or contribute to that success.
That'd be great.
That's great.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, Loretta, we'll turn it back to you.
Okay. Unless anyone has any other questions, I do have to end this meeting to begin my next one because I had to set them up as separate Zooms. So if you are doing the Steve Kaplan one for the next hour, the information is correct on the website, not from the email from Jane Jarrow this week. So please get the meeting information from the district website, not from that Jane Jarrow email. That I just found out during this meeting is incorrect. I've been trying to fix it, so, and I can't. So thank you for being here. I do appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
Thanks.
Bye.